Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today we go back to the American Revolution, specifically the year 1781. And Chris, we talk about a story I did not become familiar with until I read a book by a local Wilmington author by the name of When the British Came. This author's name is Jack Fryer. And it's called The Sniping Tree. And it's an event that took place in Wilmington in 1781 during the American Revolution. And Chris, I think from talking to you off air, I think it's clear you also were unfamiliar with this. So this is history you didn't know when even we didn't know this history before looking at this podcast episode.
And what's interesting is it just goes to show you because the episode or what we're talking about, the topic we're discussing, actually takes place near Wilmington, which
Yeah.
is very close to where we are. And so here's history you didn't know but should, right in our own backyard. And I think it's another reminder is that history continues to evolve, and there's always stories and things that you become interested in and you learn about. And I'll be honest, I had no idea what you were talking about when you said this would be a good topic. And as I told you, I was looking at the Alamo, and it just goes. You've got to dig to be able to find some stuff. But here's the thing: when you go digging, you always find gold. And I think that in this situation, you have found gold because this is one of those stories that a teacher could tell, or if you just need some good dinner conversation and you really want to impress someone, say, well, let me tell you about an interesting story about the American Revolution. And boom, you've got this story that's got just anything and everything you could ask for in it. And so it's a really good icebreaker, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. I never thought about it that way, but it is. This goes back to an incident when we talk about the sniping tree. It goes back to an incident at this particular point in the Revolution. The British are in Wilmington, and they're sort of controlling the city. Okay, and there are both British militia, Patriot militia, British regulars going throughout southeastern North Carolina. Just to be honest, sometimes committing atrocities, things today we would consider war crimes. And one of those things happened at a place called Rouse's Tavern, which is about 8 miles northeast of Wilmington. And at this particular tavern, the British, under the command of Major General James Craig, killed a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but several patriots who were there at the tavern sleeping. And when you read about this attack, Rouse's Tavern, it talks about it just being an absolute bloodbath and that there's just bodies everywhere. It was just a slaughter, like almost like a meat house type of thing. But one of the guys who was killed there was a patriot called James Love. And he had a friend who was a lieutenant colonel, of course, in the Patriot militia called Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bloodworth. And he, Chris, is seeking revenge for what happened there at Rouse's Tavern. And, I think it's just sort of one of those times where he's seeking an opportunity for revenge and he accidentally stumbles upon a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and it's happens when he's mad, he's really upset about, this massacre that's taken place. And one of the things back then that was very popular as far as sporting events was fox chase. And these individuals would go and chase the foxes, and capture them, and do whatever you wanted to do when you got them. And so North Carolina is known for some beautiful cypress trees.
Mhm.
Of course, where we are located, there are some beautiful trees that are sacred and old. I mean, been around for an extremely long period of time, and they are so sacred that there are laws as far as cutting those trees and not being able to cut those trees. And so, as he's on this fox chase, he's down there near the Cape Fear River in Wilmington before it kind of goes out into the Atlantic Ocean. And he sees this beautiful tree. And Ray, the researchers say that the tree was about 70 feet till you got to the first big branch. And the base is like 7 foot in diameter. That's huge for a cypress tree because, they're kind of skinny and they get tall, but they're kind of skinny. And so he's been chasing this fox, and this fox finds a hiding spot, and it just happens to be inside the tree. And so the dogs and all are barking at the tree, and he's there at the tree. And, as he's at that tree, he begins to say, wait a second, I might have an idea here. There might be something I might be able to do to kind of extract revenge. So, it was what Johnny Appleseed was kind of sitting underneath the tree when the apple kind of fell and hit him on his head, and he came up with a brilliant idea. And so here you have Bloodworth, which, by the way, is just a very interesting name for the subject that we're talking about,
Yeah.
because he wants blood. That while he's there at this tree, comes up with a great idea.
Yeah, he sees that this tree, one thing interesting about this tree, apparently it's hollow on the inside and it goes a long way up. So this general, Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bloodworth had been a gunsmith. So he gets this idea to use this tree in a very unique type of way. So he goes back to his home and he develops a gun, a rifle that could carry a 2-ounce ball that could be shot from that cypress tree there at a place called Point Peter on the Cape Fear in Wilmington. And it could theoretically hit the Wilmington, what they called the market area there in Wilmington along the Cape Fear. I'm assuming, Chris, this is sort of what is today Front Street down in Wilmington in that particular area, but he decides, yes, this will hit that, be able to reach that spot from this tree. And he spends some time, I guess, on some private property somewhere practicing his aim and practicing shooting this gun, which he called Old Bess, which is just the perfect name for that gun. This thing that could strike a British soldier from that far away. So what he does in June of 1781 is he gets his son, Timothy Bloodworth, and their servant, Jim Pageant, and they canoe up the river to this point, Point Peter, where this tree is located. And they do it under the guise of going hunting. And they tell everybody, look, we're going to be gone for a little while. And so they pack enough supplies and everything to be gone for a few weeks. And they tell everybody we're going to be gone. And they go up to that tree. But it's not until he gets there, Chris, that he tells his son and the servant what they're going to do. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was with somebody in a canoe and they said, here's what we're going to do, we're going to use this hollowed out tree for this purpose, I think I'd hop out of the canoe.
Yeah, because now it might be new to his son and his servant. However, as you mentioned, he's been practicing. I thought it was interesting that he had been practicing, and there was this barn door, and he had drew the figure of a man so that he, could really target certain spots. And yes, he gets there and then tells them of the plan. But Ray, this is what people today would understand to be like a sniper, being able to shoot from a very large range and to hit your target. And evidently everybody agrees. But now, Ray, what you've got to do is, the tree is hollow. I mean, so it might be a great idea and it might be wonderful to be able, because imagine you're going to be inside this tree, which we've already acknowledged is extremely large and spacious. But Ray, you've got to be able to stay there. I mean, so they actually have to build a contraption inside this tree, and then you have to bore a hole into the tree so that your musket, your rifle, could come out. And this rifle is different than we think about in today's society, because you've got the flint and you've got the lock and load, and there's a lot that goes on to this. So you have a lot of work you have to do to be able to prepare. In addition, where he is now planning on shooting this rifle from it's different from the place that he was. So you've got to adjust for the wind, which I think is kind of going down river. That's helpful because you've got to think about the smoke and you've got to think about the sound that it makes. So my gracious, he has spent so much time planning and preparing for this to happen. And then how interesting it is that on during the American Revolutionary War and to avenge the massacre of his friends on July 4th, he's ready to put this plan into motion.
Yeah, you got to think he's not going to get a second chance with this. If his position is discovered, he's dead, basically. Wilmington is surrounded, Wilmington is well guarded. The British are there. These are professional British soldiers, some of the best trained soldiers in the world. And on July 4th, 1781, he climbs that tree on that scaffolding contraption they had made inside, and he pokes that rifle through a hole, and he aims at some soldiers there in front of what they call Nelson's liquor store. And he aims at a soldier and he fires. And all of a sudden, one of those soldiers drops. So he's hit a target, and the other soldiers, they start getting their friend, and drums start beating, and the whole 9 yards. They start looking for where this shot might have come from, but they don't find it. And the servant that is with him, the guy called Pageant, he asked if he could do it too. He said, "Can I do this? This looks fun." And he climbs up the tree and he takes a shot and hits another soldier, and another soldier goes down. So you can imagine at this particular point, the British are on the watch. They're high alarm. So Bloodworth, his son, and the servant decide, okay, that's enough for a day, and they sort of sleep, Chris, inside the tree. I mean, there had to be. I don't care how big the tree is. This is not the Hilton. This is a cramped. Probably it's July in southeastern North Carolina on the Cape Fear River. This has got to be an unpleasant place to be. But these guys are dedicated to this cause. They've already dropped 2 British soldiers, and they're there to drop more British soldiers.
And the British soldiers, I mean, they run and they scatter, but they're also trying to figure out where's the source of these bullets coming from. And they begin to investigate, and they're searching, and some even get in a boat and kind of go over to where the tree is. But they don't approach that tree because it's a tree. And not only is it a tree, there's no way that anyone would ever be able to fire a gun from that distance and be able to hit their target. And so, the British are searching everywhere. And finally, they're like, look, we don't know where it is. We don't know what's going on. Maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe it was a one-time thing. And so the next morning, Colonel Bloodworth, they wake up and they say, "Hey, you ready to do it again? Let's go out there and make it happen and see what all we can do." And so what happens then is they try the same situation. They start shooting again, and I think what happens, Ray, if I'm not mistaken, that the British were scared. They didn't hang out in the middle of the street, right? They kind of go in, but then they realized nobody was shooting. They felt a little more secure, and so they just said, "Okay, let's just make this happen."
And of course, somebody else got shot at that point. And Bloodworth and his son and servant, they're going to continue this up for about a week. And the British are going to get, as you can just imagine, the British are going to get, sick and tired of this. So they go out, not just looking this time, they go out to the area at Point Peter where they've sort of figured out where the shooting is coming from. I mean, they're no longer just glancing around. They sort of figured out where it's coming from. And so they cut down a lot of trees. And like you said, they don't cut down the large cypress that Bloodworth and his son and servant are in, because, as you said, it's such a big tree. And by the time they get out there and they've looked everywhere else, well, it's too late. So they just don't bother cutting down the tree. But what happens, interestingly enough, is one of Bloodworth's neighbors actually sort of gives him away. Said, you know, he's been gone a long time and he's a patriot and all this. So there is rumors circulating around around Wilmington among the soldiers and everybody that Bloodworth is the one behind these attacks, but they actually never catch him. They never catch him in the tree. They never catch his two friends in the tree. They're never able to capture him. They're never able to prove that he was the one sniping British soldiers from that tree. But the British, they were looking for him and they were in the right area. It sort of reminds me of the old game you used to play when you were a kid. You're really, really hot. You're really, really cold. The British were really, really hot, but they never hit the target. No pun intended.
No, they don't hit the target, but one of the things that they're thinking about doing is cutting down all the trees. They think, not that the guys are inside the tree, but maybe they're up top on the tree. Maybe that's kind of where they're perched. And so they decide, hey, this is a pretty big tree. It might be that they're way up high in that tree. So we're going to cut this tree down, but it was late and they were tired. So they decided, hey, I'm going to take a nap and we'll do it in the morning. And so there's like 10 soldiers that kind of go to sleep and decide that they'll wake up in the morning, cut down the tree, and maybe this whole crisis will be over with. And then, Ray, something fascinating. This is the beauty of finding these nuggets of information, because Bloodworth thinks, man, I could kill him tonight if I need to, but I'm not going to do that. But then something happens, and that is servant. Don't know kind of why he was where he was, but he wasn't in the tree, and evidently he gets discovered. You got this guy on the island who's kind of unfamiliar, is a little shaky, and it's middle of the night, and they hear something, and that Centennial, he starts yelling out, "Who is it? Who is it? Who is it?" And Ray, this is where the story takes a unique twist, because instead of the guy saying, "It's me," Ray starts acting like an animal.
Yeah, he starts grunting like a pig. And the funny thing about it is, Chris, it worked.
I mean, he's got a great imitation of a wild hog, because but then you think about this, because it's a British guy, and maybe the British guy is just like, man, I'm over here in a foreign land. I have no idea what kind of animal that is. Middle of the night, I don't want anything to do with it. And so Ray the guard relaxes and goes to sleep, and then you've got Colonel Bloodworth and his guys. They go up to the guard. They bind him hand, foot to the tree, and they put a stick in his mouth to keep him from talking. And then they steal the man's boat and they escape. I've never heard of this story in my life, and the more I study it, the more fascinating it becomes. This is why I said it is a great dinner conversation.
Yeah.
Because people in North Carolina and all across the United States love hunting. They are very familiar with guns and things of that nature. And so it's just a fascinating story of how acting like a wild hog saves you.
It worked. You do what you got to do.
And I'll tell you this, and I probably shouldn't, but I remember when I was younger, and
wait. Are you getting ready to confess to something here?
Well, I didn't do it, but they tried to get me to do it. And so I was younger, and I was a city boy from Virginia, and I had moved into a rural part of North Carolina. And these guys wanted me to go out and go hunting with them. And I said, well, sure, I'm happy to go hunting with you. I'm not a hunter. I didn't like it, but said, yeah, we can go hunting. And I said, what kind of hunting are we going to go do? And they said, we're going snipe hunting. Well, I didn't know what kind of snipe we were going. And they said, snipe is an animal that only comes out at night. And so you got to go out and you've got to do it. And so they say there's this mysterious creature. It's called a snipe. It looks like a rabbit, looks like a squirrel. And it only comes out in the dark of night. It's got to be like a full moon kind of night. You go out there, and as you go out there, basically, while you're trying to find that animal, the people are out there making funny noises. They're making bird calls. They've got they throwing flashlights. They're making you think that there's all kinds of things that are going around. And basically what it is it's like a prank on you.
Mhm.
And you're running all around, but you hear this noise. And so instead of this guy running all around and thinking he's noise, he hears this noise and he falls asleep. So it's the opposite of snipe hunting, in which instead of chasing after something that was non-existent, this guy decides to go to sleep over something that was existent.
Did you fall for the snipe?
So they handed me the burlap bag and I met them. And then I realized that one of the guys who wanted me to go had a glass eye that he would pop out of his head and he would polish it. And then I just thought that we were something weird was about to happen. And
That,
so
that
I just said, guys, I'm just not going to do it. He had a false eye
I think
and
that's a podcast episode within itself there.
would pop it out and he would rub it into a napkin or into a cloth like you clean your eyeglasses, and then he could pop it back in. Well, he was the one leading the hunt, and I was like, this man's got a gun and he's got an eye that he pops out. I'm not going with him into the woods. So
Yeah.
I didn't go, and I later found out what snipe hunting was all about.
Yeah. Yeah, I was about to say, if you had gone on that, I'd been like, yeah, I wish I'd have known you back then. I could have saved you some embarrassment. That's a
But this guy, he could have saved some embarrassment because he goes down in the history book that he fell for a fake wild hog.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they had to be resourceful back then. But, I think what this shows is, the American Revolution was several things. Number one, obviously it's very important in the history of America. Without it, you don't have the United States as we know it today. But what stories like this show us is, number one, the brutality of the American Revolution, the incident at the tavern. I mean, just absolute bloodbath. And then this guy, hiding up in a tree, and it's funny and everything. It has its sort of weird moments, but he's killing people. He's a sniper in a tree, hitting British soldiers, many of whom were probably what we would consider teenagers. Some may have been a little older, but they would have been relatively young, well trained, well prepared, but still relatively young. This was a war, and I think these type of stories, these so small battle stories, not really battle in this particular case, but these sort of small stories of what was happening around the major battles show us a different side of the American Revolution. And of course, Chris, the American Revolution in the South, specifically South Carolina, but also North Carolina, yeah, it was brutal because in some ways it was a civil war.
Well, it was brutal because one of the ways that they fought would they would just line up in rows and they would go into the battlefield and the first row would go down, another row would come, another row. I mean, and so this is genius because this begins that thing what we will later call guerrilla warfare, in which individuals begin fighting in different manner, in different ways. So this guy is history that nobody really knows about him. I don't know if he was the founder of sniper hunting or whatever, being a sniper. I don't know, but he really did something that was out of the box. And I'm curious about the tree. I wonder if the tree is still there because like I just can't imagine. I mean, these guys, I mean, I don't know how big they were, but imagine they were at least 5'6", 5'7", and weighed, at least 100 some pounds. And there were three of them that stayed inside the tree. And, and also he had to cover up the hole. He had to cover up some things when they were getting kind of close to the tree. And Ray, I mean, I can't play hide and seek because when somebody gets close to me, I get scared and I'm ready to be the one that says, you got me, instead of them sneaking up on me. So I probably would have said, here I am. I wouldn't have been smart enough to act like a wild hog.
I wouldn't either. I'd have been laughing. It would just been too ridiculous for me. Anyway, Chris, thanks for another great episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I hope our listeners will share this episode with their family and friends. Give us a like on Spotify and on Facebook as well. Until next time, I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
Talk to you later.